theyeshiva.net.
This story that we're going to share today, Be'ezer Hashem, takes us back 1,954 years. That's a long time. And yet we still remember it, recall it, discuss it, and debate it. We're going to go on a journey today discussing the great debate about the Menorah that stood in the Beis HaMikdash, destroyed today on the 9th of Av, 1,954 years ago, in the year 70, after the Common Era, or in the Jewish calendar, in the year 3,830. Although some say it was 28 or 29, 68, 69 or 70. The story takes us on a journey from the Holy Land to Rome, to Oxford, to Egypt, and to different parts of the world. It takes us through generations, from the time of the Beis HaMikdash to the days of the Talmudic sages, to the Rishonim, to the Acharonim, all the way to great scholars and giants of our own generation. And finally, we'll bring it all together with God's grace and demonstrate a very powerful, timeless, and very relevant lesson for our lives individually and collectively. I want to especially thank the Shul and everybody behind it for all of the Tisha B'Av amazing events, including this one. My friends Rebbe and Heather Shiner, Rabbi Nachum Shiner, and the entire staff of the Shul for putting it together. I want to thank Rabbi Shmuel Gilbert for all of the video and PowerPoint production. And I want to thank also all those who gathered the material for this discussion over the years. There have been many articles and essays written about it in Svarim and in different outlets, different pamphlets, different booklets which have written about this debate, from where I gathered much of the material, including a recent class and source sheets by my friend from Beverly Hills, Rabbi Pinny Dunner. Thank you. And I want to especially thank also those who dedicated this special Tisha B'Av history lecture that's being shown here and also around the world. I want to thank Torah Anytime and the yeshiva.net and all the other websites that are live streaming this event and so many other amazing classes and gatherings of Chizuk, Emunah, Hisayrus, history, Hashkafa, etc. on Tisha B'Av Yehafech L'Simcha. And I want to thank three of the sponsors for this class, dedicated by Esther and Nachman Goodman in honor of our fallen soldiers. May God avenge the blood of our most precious and sacred young souls who have sacrificed their lives, especially in the recent months since Simchas Torah, since October 7th, for our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land. So this is dedicated in honor and in sacred memory of all of the fallen soldiers. Dedicated also by Avremi and Rachel Spitz. May we merit to see a sweet Geula Shlema, a complete redemption. And dedicated in honor of our Rebbe with tremendous love and appreciation by David and Ida Schattenstein. Thank you very, very much, David and Ida. Thank you very, very much, Nachman and Esther. Thank you very, very much, Avremi and Rachel. If you didn't get a source sheet, please take your source sheet. It's 4 pages, should be stapled, so it's 4 sides with 2 pages. If you look at most of the depictions of the candelabra of the Menorah, I'm going to try to translate in English because not everybody has such a fluent and perfect Hebrew. Those of you who are great scholars and knowledgeable in Hebrew, you'll forgive. We like to accommodate everybody, or at least as many as we can. If you look at most pictures or depictions, at least until a few years ago, but even today in many books, or in schools, or in worksheets, or in pamphlets, or in Svarim, depictions, artistic depictions of the Menorah, of the candelabra in the Beis HaMikdash, they will usually be depicted as 7 branches which are rounded. If you take a look at the first image, you could put up the first image of the Menorah, the round Menorah. This is a classic Menorah that was reconstructed by the Machan HaMikdash, Rav Ariel and his team, his amazing team in Yerushalayim in the Old City. You can go for a tour where they recreated, at least according to their understanding, many of the vessels and the pieces of furniture. So this is a classic image of the Menorah. You have here 7 branches, of course, the middle branch, the middle stem known as the Kanievsky, and then from that stem come out another 3 on each side to the right and to the left, and they are all what you would call in Hebrew igulim, semicircles, coming up and reaching the top of the Menorah. Why did this become the picture of the Menorah? Because apparently for many, many generations, close to 2,000 years, at least many artists, many designers have imagined that this is what the Menorah looked like in the Beis HaMikdash. In fact, in recent archaeological excavations that were done especially over the last 50 years, they have found in different places in the Holy Land in Eretz Yisrael, menorahs engraved, and some of them are very, very ancient, engraved in old shuls or in old homes, depictions of the menorah, or on coins, even in a cemetery. They're found between 5 or 10, I believe, and many of them are round. If you'll take a look at the next image here, this is an example. This was found, if you go today, you can see it on your screens, right? In the women's section and in the men's section, yeah. If you go today to the old city of Jerusalem, and you go to what they call the Rova, the Jewish quarter in the old city, this was found over there in the home, one of the homes that they discovered that served the Jewish community at the end of the era of the second Beis HaMikdash where Kohanim lived. In one of those homes, they find on the ground this particular image. Here you see a menorah. And of course, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The guy even tried to make some designs on the branches, which the Torah says you should have. The branches had the 3 designs. They had a gavia, they had a goblet, they had a kaftar, which looked like an apple, an egg, an apple, and they had a perach, a flower. So here you have on the ground of this home, found at the end of the era of the second Beis HaMikdash, a menorah that was depicted. This was not found long ago. This was found recently. Here is another one that was found not long ago. Here again. You see again the menorah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and again it is round. And here you have yet another one. A cemetery in Sharim, the entrance to a cemetery, they decided to engrave a menorah. And there are others. There's even one from a coin at the end of the era of the Chashmonaim, Matisyahu Antigonus, he made a coin, also has a depiction of a menorah with the round branches. But the way, even before most of these discoveries, which happened only in our generation or previous generation, what really caused this image to take root in the Jewish and non-Jewish world, probably we can assume was the most famous depiction of the menorah in the world, and that is, of course, in Rome. And this takes us to the next image that you can see right here. This is known, we call it Arch Titus, the Arch of Titus. And this Arch of Titus, when you can walk through it, you will see this image that was engraved in the arch. And this was built when? This was built and constructed in the year 82 after the Common Era. That is only 11 or 12 years after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. The second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, as I said, in the year 70, although some put it at 68 or 69. In the Hebrew calendar, it's 3,828 or 29 or 30. That's why now it's 1,954 years or 55 years or 56 years. Usually they say, who's counting? But we're counting. We're counting. And, so we count. And Titus has this gate, this arch, more than a gate, an arch, developed and built in his honor. He's not the one who built it. He's been dead already. His brother built it. So here you have the entire arch, and here you have inside the arch, if you look, and you can go to Rome and you could see it today. I should say for many, many generations, Roman Jews who lived there specially abstained from going here, because this was a place that was used to denigrate and embarrass the Jewish people. It was all built to demonstrate the defeat of the Beis HaMikdash, of Jerusalem, the decimation of Judea, the murder of countless Jews. Not only that, one of the popes would bring Jews here as a symbol for the submission of the Jews. This was the place to demonstrate that their religion is obsolete and gone. So many Jews in Rome would, for many, many years, abstain from going here. What do you see in this image? You see temple vessels being carried. Being carried by whom? In front you have Jewish slaves being taken in shackles. Behind you have Roman legions. And apparently this is depicting the parade that was made in Rome in the year 72 after 71, after Titus comes back from Jerusalem to Italy, from Jerusalem to Rome. And the nation comes out and arranges a parade to celebrate this amazing, stupendous, improbable victory. And a major part of the parade is, he has the slaves and the Jewish slaves and the Roman troops parading the expensive, brilliant, dazzling, magnificent pieces of furniture and vessels stolen from the Beis HaMikdash and now brought to Rome. Titus dies. Now, how did it work? Vespasian was Titus's father. In Gemara, he's called Aspasionis Caesar. Aspasionis is Vespasian. He was sent by Neron, in our sources Neron, to be the commander-in-chief to crush down the revolt of the Jews against Rome that began a few years earlier, 66, after the Common Era. But Aspasionis was called back to become the emperor in Rome. In Roman history, Nero committed suicide. In Gemara Gittin, there's a whole other version of what happened to Nero, but he was gone. And now they needed a new emperor. Vespasian was brought back to Rome, and he chose his son, Titus, to take over the job, to be the commanding general, to supervise the destruction of Jerusalem and the Beis HaMikdash and crush the Jewish revolt. This Titus did with extraordinary brutality, precision, and success. And despite a profound and intense war that went on the 9th of Av, he manages to ignite the Beis HaMikdash in flames after a long siege. The city is destroyed, the temple is destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of Jews are murdered, according to Josephus, who lived at the time. He was a Kohen Yosef ben Matisyo. He went over to the Romans. They call him Josephus Flavius. His Jewish name was Yosef ben Matisyo. And he wrote down the history of the time. Maybe not everything is reliable because he was working for the Romans, but probably a lot of it is reliable. He describes more than 1 million Jews were killed. The survivors were sold as slaves, and the price of slaves went down to what we would call $1. That's how many slaves there were. $1. So part of the parade parades the success of Titus when he comes back to Rome a year later. Titus dies, his brother Domitian takes over, and he's the one who builds around 10, 11 years later in 81, 82. The Churban, remember, happens in 70. This is 12 years later. He builds this arch. And he has the artists, the builders, depict the parade. So what are they depicting? Them bringing back all these vessels from the temple. If you look closely, you could see the trumpets. I just made it larger here. You could see the chatzotzros, what we call the chatzotzros. You see 2 trumpets. Behind it, you could see what many associate would be the shulchan, the table where the showbread is. And of course, you see them carrying that ancient Jewish symbol, the glory of the Beis HaMikdash, on which the Gemara says in Menachos, Eidusi l'chol boi olam sh'ashchina she'er b'Yisrael. This was the testimony to all the world that the divine presence rests among Israel, among the Jewish people. The Gemara says that in Menachos Pevav, and this is the Menorah. This has become so ingrained, literally. It's almost 2,000 years old. And apparently, even before the archaeological discoveries, this is great proof. I mean, it's built it's built a decade after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. It's called the Arch of Titus. It's showing the slaves and the Romans bringing the Jewish slaves, bringing back the vessels. And here you have a menorah. You have what it looks like, and it has 7 branches. Apparently, this should put an end to the story. So there was a menorah. We don't know what it looked like because we never saw it. If you'll take a look in the first source in your source sheets, this you have to look in the source sheets text, Sifri Zuta B'Haloischa. This is known as the small Sifri in Parshas B'Haloischa. Amar Reb Shimon says, and who is Reb Shimon? Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who lives post the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Reb Shimon bar Yochai, who escapes the Romans because there's a death sentence, and he lives in a cave. He hides in a cave with his son for 13 years until he comes out. Reb Shimon bar Yochai, who is considered one of the greatest sages of his time, he's a student of Rabbi Akiva. And therefore he already lives decades after the destruction. He didn't see the Beis HaMikdash. Reb Shimon bar Yochai lived in the persecutions, during the era of the persecutions of Rome against the Jewish people in the next century. He testifies, I went to Rome. I saw in Rome the Menorah. He doesn't say he saw the Arch of Titus. He could have seen that too, but that's not the Menorah. That's an arch, which we have the engraved, a picture of them carrying the Menorah. He says, I saw the Menorah, the 6 branches were facing the middle stem, the Neir Emtsai, the middle lamp, the center stem of the Menorah. Avos de Reb Nosson, Perek Mem Aleph, chapter 41, Avos de Reb Nosson. This is a commentary on Pirkei Avos, written yet by the Tanoim themselves, Reb Nosson Abavli. Dvarim Asuyin Ugnuzin, what was made and hidden, Elohein, Oyel Mayed, the temple, the Mishkan, the sanctuary of Moshe was hidden. Kalim Shabbai, all the vessels. Aaron, the ark, Shivrei Luchas, which has also the broken Luchas. Tzinsenes Haman, the barrel with the man, Hamata, the staff of iron that grew almonds. Tzloicha Shel Shemen HaMishcha, the jug of the anointing oil that Moshe made. Makle Shel Aaron, the staff of iron, Shkadah Prachel, the staff of Aaron and its almonds and flowers. Bigdei Kahuna, Bigdei Kayin Mashiach, the garments of the Kayin who was anointed. Avol Michtesha Shel Beis Aftinos, the crusher used by the house of Aftinos, who would make the Ketores. They would take 11 types of herbs and pound it into powder. And that powder was ignited every single day, the burning of the incense in the morning and the afternoon, called the Ketores. Shulchan, the table, Menorah, Parayches, Tzitz, Adayan Munachin Beroimi. They are still in Rome, according to the Avos de Reb Nosson. I should say, there's contradictions to this. The Medrash Rabbi says in Parshas Baloischa that the Menorah was hidden. Other sources as well say the Menorah was hidden. But at least here we have 2 sources that say, Reb Shimon says, I saw the Menorah in Rome. And the Avos de Reb Nosson says, Adayan Munachin Beroimi, the tzitz, the Menorah, the table, the parayches, the curtain, and the tzitz, which was the plate on the forehead of the high priest, are still in Rome. Apparently, this should put an end to the story until the 3rd Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, b'mheira b'yameinu, speedily in our days, hopefully this Tisha B'Av. All we could say is probably this is what the Menorah looked like, and if we want to make a picture of the Menorah to teach our children, our students, or ourselves, or to give some graphic visualization, it should obviously look somewhat like this. But you know, in Jewish history, nothing is so simple, and nothing is just put to rest and say, let's move on. We just don't do that. So, you open up the greatest commentator in Jewish history. The greatest biblical and Talmudic commentator in Jewish history is, of course, Rashi. Now, Rashi lived 1,000 years after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. Rashi lived, of course, in a very different era, in the 11th century. He observed and witnessed the first crusade of 1096, about which we read today some of the kinnis, some of the heart-wrenching poems of the crusades of Tuf, Nun Vav, Gzeres Tatnav, which happened in Mainz, and in Worms, and in Spiro in Germany. And Rashi lived in Germany, but primarily lived in France. Rashi wrote a commentary on Chumash, the quintessential commentary on Chumash, and he gives a different depiction. Let's learn the verse in Truma, because I want to see what Rashi says. So this is the source for the whole Menorah. Parshas Truma, Perek Chafei, Pasuk Lamed Aleph, that's Exodus chapter 25, verse 31, etc. Vasisa Menorah Zav Tar. God tells Moses, Hashem tells Moshe, build, make a menorah, a candelabra of pure gold. Miksha Teyasa Menorah. It should be made of one piece of gold. Yirecha, it should have a base. V'kana, and a stem, a central stem. Gviyeh, it must have goblets. Bechers, cups. Kaftereha, kafter is like a button. It's the design of an apple or an egg, a circular apple. Ufracha, its flowers. Mimena yiyu should all be hammered out from the same gold of the menorah itself. Not easy. V'shisha kanim yotzim mitzidah. 6 branches, 6 sticks. Kanim is a stick, a branch. Come out from the side. Shloisha knei menorah mitzida echad, shloisha knei menorah mitzida hasheni. 3 of the stems emerge to the right from one side of the central stem, and 3 emerge from the other one. Comes Rashi and says, what does this mean? Says Rashi, yoitzim mitzideh lekan ulekan be'alachzain. The stems, the branches come out from this side, from the right, and from the other side, from the left. Be'alachzain. Be'alachzain means diagonally. So it's a straight line in a diagonal. So as you could see in this image that was depicted based on these words of Rashi, you have the central stem of the menorah. Of course, you have all those designs. You have the apples, the kaftarim, you have the goblets, you have the flowers. But what Rashi is saying is, from both sides, you have the third branch, you have 3 branches coming out, ba'alachsa. We don't see here a semicircular, curved image of a branch, but straight lines diagonally. And Rashi continues, they extend and they go up all the way till they reach the full height of the central stem. So that according to Rashi, you have 7 branches that are uniform on top. They're even though each one must be shorter or longer than the other one, because based on where it's coming out from the central stem. They all come out from the middle stem, one above the other. Of course, the lower one must be longer, because it has to extend till the top. The one above it can be shorter. And yet the one above it, remember there's 3 coming out from each side, is yet shorter. Because they're all uniform on top. And the central one came all the way to the top, and the 3 came out from him, and then they all met on the top. This is Rashi's depiction of the menorah. And it's interesting. Where did Rashi get this from? Where did Rashi get this word ba'alachsin from? Now it's interesting. It doesn't say it. If it would say in Gemara or Mishnayos, our sages discuss what the menorah looked like. We have a sugya, Maseches Menachos, Daf Chav Ches. We have a brisa called Meleches HaMishkan, the way the Mishkan was built. We have other sources in Mishnayos or Midrashim or Gemara for different parts of the Mishkan. Those are the 2 primary, Menachos and brisa. They mention a lot of things about the menorah. They don't mention the word ba'alachzain. Rashi puts in this word ba'alachzain. It was diagonal. And it's interesting. It doesn't even seem relevant here. Why did Rashi even need this word? Rashi's job is not to describe history. Rashi's job is what? As he always says, Ani basi lefarish pshutish al mikra, to explain the verses. His job is to explain what it means. There was a middle stem, and 6 came out on the side. That's what he has to explain. The shape of it doesn't say in Chumash. But Rashi, seemingly superfluous. It's almost like he's throwing in this word. Rashi would have perfectly made sense. Yoitzim mitzidah, lekan or lekan. Take out the word ba'alachsin and mshachin van. First of all, what's the source? Second of all, why is it even necessary? But this is what Rashi says. We have a lot of manuscripts of Rashi over the generations that have been published. This is in every manuscript of Rashi. So you might say, okay, so we have one source, Rashi, who believes for whatever reason that the branches went up ba'alachzain in a diagonal form. So it's one person, Rashi, versus all the pictures and all the depictions. And what's common, even in many chumashim that they have pictures today, you'll usually see round menorahs. And if you go to the old city of Jerusalem, they have right there, and all the pizza and falafel shops and the glass, a beautiful round menorah. Okay, Rashi would disagree. It's one opinion. It's not the first thing that Jews have argued about in history. But fascinatingly, we now go to the next step. Who is the second most seminal commentator and halachic authority in the Jewish world, the Jewish history, is the Rambam. Maimonides. The Rambam lived a generation after Rashi. The Rambam was born 1135. He lived in the 12th century. The Rambam passed away in 1204. At the age of 69, he was born in Cordova in Spain, and he passes away in Egypt, and he's of course interred in Tiberias, mi Moshe v'ad Moshe le'kam k'Moshe, it says on his tombstone, from Moses to Moses there arose nobody like Moses, like Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe ben Maimon. And here something interesting happens in history. Now if you take a look here, Rashi's depiction, here is another one similar to this depiction. Again, these are all Ba'al Lachsoin. Ba'al Lachsoin. Take a look at your next source. Page 2, third paragraph. Pirush HaMishnayis LaHarambam Menachos Perek Gimel Mishnah Zayin. The Rambam, Maimonides, wrote many, many Jewish works. And also works that are not necessarily Jewish, because the Rambam wrote 18 books on medicine. Most people don't know that. He wrote approximately, I believe, 18 books on medicine, including homeopathic medicine, herbs, including anatomy, pharmacology, and many aspects of biology. Fascinating books in Arabic. The Rambam also, of course, wrote some of the timeless classics of Judaism. The most famous, the Yad HaChazaka, the Mishnah Torah, considered the most important halachic work in Jewish history, the foundation of the entire structure of halacha, how it was developed. But before that, he wrote a commentary on Mishnayos. He wanted to make the Mishnah palpable. He wrote this while he was escaping from the Almohads, who took over Spain, and they wouldn't allow the Jews to remain there unless they converted to Islam. Almohads. This was a radical group of Islamists. And their leader had a vision that Muhammad came to him and said, for the first 500 years of Islam, you can let the Jews live. Afterwards, either they become Islamic or they die. And the Almohads went from town to town and country to country and conquered. So Maimonides, Rambam, and his family escaped. On the road, in caves, hiding, that's when he wrote the commentary of the Mishnah. He was very young when he began, I think like 21 or 22. He wrote it in Arabic. The only work that he wrote in Hebrew and Lashon Kodesh was the Yad HaChazaka, the Mishnah. Everything else he wrote in Arabic, and we use translations. And there were many translations done for the Rambam's commentary. So this is originally written in Arabic, and the Rambam says as follows. Menachos chapter 3. Ra'isi l'tzayer b'kan suras ha-menorah shleima. I decided that I want to make a picture. I want to depict the complete form of the menorah. This is what I want to do so people know what's happening. Now don't hold me accountable that the becher, the goblet, is going to be exactly what it looked like. What does he mean by that? He means by that if you look at his goblet, if you're going to look at the goblet in a moment, we're going to see that doesn't stand. The Rambam brought it to a point. So he says it's not exactly, it's not precise. Ela kavana boy, what I really want is idiyas minyan agvim akaftoirim aprachim amukamoisam. I want you should understand the number, how many goblets, how many apples, how many flowers, and where they were located. I want you to understand the empty space where there was nothing. I want you to understand where everything was. And I want to give you a general image of what the menorah looked like. But whenever anybody opened up a commentary of the Mishnah, there was no picture. The Rambam said, I'm going to take a picture, I'm going to make a picture. There was no picture. And the reason is because everything was copied, manuscript to manuscript. And whoever was copying the manuscripts didn't feel that he was a good artist or she was a good artist. And therefore, the Rambam says he made a picture, but most people who were learning the commentary of the Mishnah of the Rambam didn't have this picture. In 1693, a manuscript of the Rambam was found of this commentary, with a perfect picture of the Rambam of the Menorah in his original handwriting, and it was sold to Oxford University. But it remained in Oxford, and for many years Oxford would not allow Jews to see that special collection of manuscripts, and until it was finally made public. And for this we have to thank somebody who lived in our generation, and his name was Rav Yosef Kapach, of blessed memory. Rav Yosef Kapach was a very, very interesting Jew. He was a Yemenite Jew. In Yemen, the Rambam was above everybody else. In fact, during the lifetime of the Rambam, they added words in the Kaddish in Yemen, in Taimon. You know what they said in Kaddish? B'chayeichain, u'b'yoymeichain, u'b'chayei de Rabbana Moshe ben Maimon, u'b'chayei de Chol Beis Yisrael ba'agolo v'zman karev imru amen. That's how sacred the presence, the wisdom, the holiness, the scholarship, the kedusha, the Torah of the Rambam was in Yemen. And until his last breath, Rav Kapach and the Yemenite Jews always follow the verdict of the Rambam, even in many areas where the Rambam's view is the minority in halacha, and we follow other views, but not for Yemenite Jews. Rav Kapach was a great scholar, as many people in Israel, some liked him, some didn't like him, but we're not going to get into that today. Certain elements in Jerusalem, it's hard for them to like anybody that they don't like, so they didn't like him either. But okay, there were some legitimate debates as well. And Rabbi Yosef Kapach retranslated the Rambam's commentary on Mishnah completely from Arabic. His own original translation from Arabic, he himself translated, and he published it a number of years ago. Rav Kapach also published the entire Yad HaChazaka, which was written in Hebrew, with his own commentary. And many other works of the Ram that he himself translated. So you'll have a commentary of Mishnayos, you have the old translation, and then you'll have the Kapach translation, which he was very meticulous about. And when he published it, he got hold of this manuscript, and he said, we have here a picture of the Rambam, we have here a depiction of the Menorah, and Rav Kapach published it a few decades ago, and here it is in your next image. This is the original handwriting of the Rambam. On top, he's writing in Arabic. He's describing what the Menorah looked like. And this is the image that he promised that he's going to make, what the Menorah looked like. You have it also in your source sheet, so you could see it in your source sheets, even closer up. This Rav Kapach published, this is what the Rambam meant, Pirush HaMishnayos. Suddenly, wow, Rashi, Ba'alach Zayin, and suddenly the Rambam, exactly like Rashi. Exactly. Completely diagonal. And here the Rambam, you could see, is very, even though he says he's not being meticulous with everything, because if you look at his goblets, you see they come to a pointed end. You can't put them on a table. It's like the Gemara in Psachim, V'lo hoyle b'zichim shulayim. Sometimes they didn't want to put down the cup, the blood shouldn't be congealed, but usually cup, you got to put it down on the table, you're not going to hold it. You're not going to hold it. Sometimes in gyms or other exercise rooms, they have these little paper cups and they don't want you to put it down, so it comes to a point. So the Rambam makes that the picture. That's what he says. I'm not being meticulous about this, but I want you to have the general picture. So he has the exact number of goblets, which were 22 goblets, the exact number of the flowers, of the kaftorim. You could even see the base. The Rambam writes Yerecha, this is the handwriting of the Rambam Yerecha, and you could see there's 3 legs coming down from the base. Because the Rambam and Rashi both say the Menorah had 3 legs. It wasn't just a base that you put down on the ground. There were 3 legs to the Menorah. Rashi says this in Truma. The Rambam says this in Halach, in Hilchos Beis Abchira, and in the commentary of Mishnah. In Reb Shapsi Frankel's Rambam, he sources it to a medrash called Dat Tache. The Gemara in Menachos Chavches says the Menorah had legs. The Menorah had raglayim. That the Gemara says clearly. That Chazal say in a few sources, doesn't say 3. The Rambam has here 3 legs. Rashi also says 3 legs because there's other sources that there were 3 legs. And the Rambam gives here the exact depiction where it is on each stem. But you take a look and you see that suddenly Rashi and the Rambam, the 2 greatest commentators and halachic codifiers in Jewish history, both have exactly the similar view. Ba'alach Zayin. If you take a look here in the next image, this is just in the Frankel Rambam where he took the Rambam's picture and he just put it into print so it should be very clear. But this is exactly the Rambam's picture. You could see the base. And he translates all the words, of course, into the original Hebrew. This is the Frankel Rambam. Reb Shapsi Frankel gave it a Rambam where he also collected it from all recent handwritings, manuscripts that they discovered. Here is the exact depiction of the Rambam in the commentary of the Mishnah. And here is another depiction of it, obviously based on the image of the Rambam. So some people say, I saw somebody wrote an article about this, and he says, come on, don't take the Rambam's picture so seriously. The Rambam himself wrote, we just read it, that I'm not trying to tell you the image of the goblet bedikduk. So who said he was trying to do the image of the stems bedikduk? But I believe intellectual honesty would gravitate more towards a different view. And that is that the Rambam says that when it comes to the goblet, don't think that it's precise. But I do want to give you a general depiction of the Menorah. To say that instead of doing it round, he did it diagonally and he didn't really mean it that way, it was just maybe easier or faster, especially when it comes to the Rambam. What is the uniqueness of the Rambam among other great features? Everybody knows the Rambam's uniqueness in Jewish scholarship is organization, structure, precision. There's no mastery of halacha like when you learn Mishnah Torah Yada Chazaka. His Mishnah Torah encompasses all of Judaism, the halachas of the Beis HaMikdash, the halachas of Mashiach, those that are relevant today, those that are not relevant today, in a systematic, organized way. It's exactly how he wanted to present Judaism, as he writes in his introduction to Yad HaChazaka. I want to give Judaism kakotan, kagadol, to the young and to the old, beloshen, tzoro, brura, clear and precise. This is his stamp, this is his uniqueness. Especially, if you take a look again at the picture, take a look at the base. He did the base round. He knew how to make a circle. Look at the base. He made it round. The Rambam knew how to make a circle. I don't know how to make a circle, but he knew how to make a circle. Take a look at the kaftarim. He made them like beautiful, round, perfect apples. Look at them. Look at the kaftarim. Every one of them. And the base as well. And take a look at his flowers. What do his flowers look like? A half a circle. Not a full moon, a half a moon. Take a look at his flowers, a half a circle. You see? Circles. But when it came to the branches, suddenly this theory says, don't take him seriously. But the truth is, you don't have to listen to me. Rabbi Avram, the son of the Rambam, wrote something about this. The Rambam had a son, Rabbi Avram. He actually took him over as the leader of the Egyptian community after his father passed away. His father passed away, Chav Tevis, the 20th of Tevis, 1204 or 1205. The Rambam was 69 years old, almost 70, at least according to most. He lived in Egypt. He was buried in Eretz Yisrael. As I mentioned, his son, Rebbe Avram, took him over. His son has a commentary to Chumash. The commentary was printed only in 1958. That's just a few decades ago. So nobody knew about this commentary. It was in manuscript form. But today we have it. Rebbe Avram ben Arambam knew about his father's picture. He didn't have to go to Oxford. He lived with his father. So Rebbe Avram writes about the picture of his father. Take a look. You have it in your next source sheet, page 2, the last source. Rebbe Avram ben Arambam Pirushe L'Torah Truma Chav Hei Lamed Beis. Says Rebbe Avram, Hakanim Kemoy Anofim. The stems, the sticks, kanim are sticks, were like branches of a tree. Nimshachim migufer shel menorah, stretching out, emerging from the stem, from the central body, the guf of the menorah, b'yosher. They came out straight, b'yosher. Exactly the way my father, my master of blessed memory, depicted. He says, I've seen other pictures. Those pictures, the branches, are circular, like semicircles. Mistake. That person, whoever made that picture, doesn't know the truth. It's exactly like my father did it. Did Rebbe Avram hear this from the Rambam directly? He doesn't say if he heard it from his father. But Rebbe Avram is saying, oh, my father knew exactly what he was doing, and this is exactly how he did it. He wanted to do it, and it's right. Rebbe Avram ben Arambam. If you take a look above Pirush of Yosef Kapach, Rav Kapach writes in his commentary on the Mishnah. I told you he translated the Rambam's commentary and then he writes his notes. He says, "Hadavar hashave b'chol kisvei hayat." The thing I've seen in all the manuscripts, shesheishes hakanim yotzim and hakanim tzoiva oilim b'kav yosher ad l'goy v'amenor. All the 6 come out of the middle stem and they come out b'kav yosher. A straight line. It's diagonal, but it's a straight line. It's not curved, it's not bent, it's not circular. Ve'ein bem shum kashtiyot klal. You know what kashtiyot are? Keshet is like an arch. Chatzi keshet would be like a semicircle. It has none of this klal at all. Take a look in the picture of the Rambam. Now, something else was very mysterious. This is the Rambam's commentary on Mishnah. The Rambam has also, as I mentioned, a book. It's 14 books called Mishnah Torah Yad HaChazak. This is his halachic work. Over there he has Hilchas Beis HaBchira. The Rambam divided Yiddishkeit, halach, into 14 sections. Mada, Avaz, Manim, Noshim, Kedusha, Afla, Zroim, Avodah, Karbonis, Tyron, Ezikin, Kinyan, Mishpatim, Shoftim. You're going to be tested at the end. Avodah represents the story of the work in the Beis HaMikdash. The first section is Hilchas Beis HaBchira. In the third chapter, he begins HaMenorah Tzurasa Mefureshes B'Torah. We know the form of the Menorah because it's explicit in the Torah. And then he goes through all the details, and then he puts in 3 words, V'zuhi Tzurasa, and here is a picture. But if you look at most Rambams for hundreds of years, the Rambam passed away 1205, the Rambam was already a bestseller during his lifetime. His halachic work was a bestseller during his lifetime. It was a classic then, it's a classic now. There's no picture. So many printers just took out V'zui Tzirasa. Write this is a picture and then don't give me a picture. You got to deliver what you're telling me you deliver. They took it out. In recent years, they found old manuscripts from the Rambam before the printing press was invented. And they found 3 different kisveyat, 3 different manuscripts, written a few years after the Rambam's passing, and there you have the picture of the Rambam. So we have 3 manuscripts that copied the original Rambam, where he made a picture of the Menorah, and there we have the Rambam's picture, 3 different manuscripts, all depicting the original manuscript of Yad HaChazaka, and they were all published recently. In the Franco Rambam, he has one of them. Rabbi Yeshua Monsey and others published other ones. They were discovered in Egypt, I believe. And here, take a look at all 3 of them. What do you see in the Rambam here? How did he make the Menorah? You see? Exactly like in the Mishnah. Ba'alachsain. This is the first manuscript. This is actually the earliest one we have. It was written in Toledo, Spain, in 1260. This was done 1260. That means it's a few decades after the Rambam passed away. It's more than 200 years before the first printing press that would print Hebrew books comes out. The Rambam, as I said, passed away 1204, 1205. This is 1260. Now take a look at the second manuscript we have from the Yad HaChazaka. And this, in many ways, is the most reliable. Take a look at the Rambam's picture in the Mishnah Torah. Now, unlike the other one from the Mishnayos, this is not his. This is a copy. But that is his original picture, so its reliability is of a different level with his writings. But this was copied. And this Ksav Yad, this manuscript, doesn't have a date, but it's approximately around 1340. And the person who wrote it writes something fascinating. And what does he write here? Take a look, page 3 in your source sheet. Here you have a close-up picture of this manuscript. Text Haksav Yad. Higati Sefer Zeh. I was Magia. I monitored. I corrected. I edited this book. Mi Sefer Asher Kosav Alav Biksav Yidei Rabbeinu Moshe HaMechaber Shamrei Utzuroi V'kach Kosav Alav Biksav Yodoi Hugo Mi Sifri V'kosav Moshe ben Maimon. Wow. He says, I made this from a book, and in that book it's written, in the handwriting of the Rambam, this book was copied from my original manuscript. So that's what he writes in this manuscript. That the Rambam testified that this person copied it from my original. He writes his own name. So that's pretty authoritative. And that's why you see the base is also that perfect base. Yerecha, you see? The same like he does in the commentary of the Mishnah. And the 6 branches of the Menorah coming out from the central stem come out diagonally. And now if you take a look at the third manuscript, also a picture of the Yad HaChazaka. This one is a third one. This comes from Italy, 1389. And once again, the same exact image. To say that the Rambam didn't mean this. He just wanted to make a picture and he just threw out an image. When he wrote in the Mishnayos, this is the picture and we have the picture. When he wrote in the Yad HaChazaka, this is the picture and our generation has the picture of the Rambam. And it has the common denominator of the shape of the Menorah, exactly like Rashi says in Parshas Truma. And therefore, Rav Kapach, in this quote that I quoted earlier in your source sheet, Rav Kapach says, page 2, Rav Kapach says, in all the Kisveyad, all the manuscripts, you don't see any circle, you don't see any semicircle, you'll see only a straight line diagonal. Rav Kapach passed away in the year 2000, 24 years ago. He was a member in the Bezdin Harabani Hagadol in Eretz Yisrael in Yerushalayim, and very, very influential, especially among the Yemenite communities. And as I mentioned, his works, and here you have a picture of Rabbi Kapach in his later years. He was born in 1918 or 1917, and he passed away in 2000. So, we began the class by thinking that the picture of the Menorah was very clear. We have all these archaeological discoveries, we have all these pictures, in all these Sfarim, and all these pamphlets, and we have the Arch of Titus. But then suddenly we went over to the actual Jewish sources, not Titus, not Rome, not archaeology. We actually went over to Rambam and Rashi, the two greatest commentating halachic authorities, and hands down, they have a completely different depiction, ba'alachsain, diagonal. So we have Rashi, Rabban Shal Yisrael, the Rebbe of all the Jewish people, and the Rambam, who both have this view. If you take a look in the commentary of the Ralbag, who is one of the Rishonim, Rabbeinu Levi ben Gershom, 14th century, it's known as Gershonite. There too, the commentator on his commentary on Torah says the Ralbag also seems like that he felt it was Ba'alachsan, it was diagonal. Another Rishon was Rabbeinu Yosef B'chor Shor. He also has a commentary on Chumash, and there he too uses the word alachsain. So you have Rashi, Rambam, Ralbag, Rabbi Yosef B'chor Shor, four of the Rishonim who believe that the Menorah had diagonal shapes. Now the question is, how did they know this? Where did Rashi get this from? Where did the Rambam get this from? As it says, it doesn't say this in Gemara. It doesn't say this in Brisa. It doesn't say this in Mishnayos. It doesn't say it in a Medrash that we know. One possibility is, like the Rambam writes about a lulav and an esrog, that from Yehoshua ben Nun we know exactly what a lulav and an esrog looks like because we heard it from our father every year before Sukkot. Maybe this was a tradition Rashi and Rambam had, Rebbe to Rebbe, perhaps, maybe, and this is a likely possibility. There are many midrashim that have not reached us. We see different things that the Rambam and Rashi and other Sfarim of that generation wrote, and many commentators say there may have been texts that they had access to that were lost over the generations and the persecutions and the wandering, just like there are tractates even in Gemara that are missing, and manuscripts, so many manuscripts that were lost, and Tosfos, and there were so many other things, midrashim too. And we know midrashim that were discovered later, perhaps Rashi and the Rambam had access to one of these sources of Chazal where it said this, and therefore they didn't even ask a question. It was clear it was Ba'alachsan, there was no argument about it, just like we see, they say, both of them say the Menorah had 3 legs, that we do have a medrash called Medrash Tache. There may be also another explanation. The other explanation I heard from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he said that the word used in Chumash for the branches is koneh, knei ha-menorah, shisha konim. What is a koneh? What is the literal interpretation of a koneh? Anybody remembers where's the first time a koneh? We have here Bal Qaeda. The first time koneh is Parshas Miketz. Sheva shibolim oilois bekoneh echad. The dream of Pharaoh, right? 7 stalks. Oilois bekoneh echad. What does a koneh mean? Is it straight or is it curved? You ever go to a farm or no more? You look at a koneh, it's straight. Koneh means a stick. It usually means straight. So he said, maybe Rashi was just telling you, we're just reading the words. Wherever koneh is used, I don't think there's one place where you have to say that it's curved or it's semicircular. And in many cases, it's mukhrach to say, it seems that that's the obvious logical translation. So they didn't go further. They said if it's a koneh, it was a koneh. So therefore it was a straight diagonal stem that came out of the menorah and went all the way up. That's another possibility. You have in Yecheskel, the word koneh is called koneh midah, which is a measurement stick. In the Navi Yecheskel, and what does it mean over there? It can't mean curved because then you can't measure anything. It must mean a knei midah, straight stick in Yecheskel Navi. So this is already in the Tanakh. How you have in Yeshaya, koneh v'agam kamalu. Again, it's something that's growing in a field, in a farm, in a swamp. That's a possibility. So I was looking, is there a source, actually? Is there a real source? We're soon going to get back to Titus, to the gate of the Arch of Titus. Is there a source clear that it was round? So there is a place, and you'll take a look, Sifri Zuta Bahaloischa. It's your the second source in page 3. Yiyu Chayzrin Chalila Kamin Atara. He says that the Talmud Lema Yiru Shivas Haneris. Now, this is very ambiguous words. Chayzrin Chalila Kamin Atara means moves around, chalila means around, like a crown. What does this mean? So the Magen Avram, the great halachic commentator, Rabbi Avram Evli Gumberger, has a sefer people don't know so much about it. It's called Zayis Ran on Medrash. And in Parshas Ba'aloischi, he says, what does this mean? So he wants to say, maybe it means that it was semicircular. He says, V'doichik, it doesn't seem that that's what it means. What it means is something else. It means that according to this opinion, the menorah was a completely different type of piece of furniture. It looked like our Shabbos Leichter. It looked like our candelabras, where you have the middle, and the other branches were surrounding it Kamin Torah. That's what the Magen Avram suggests the Sifri Zuta means. But then he says we have a big problem because this contradicts our sources in Chazal, where you had the 7 branches that were uniform and in one line, whether they were round or diagonal. You take a look in the Even Ezra, one more source, Even Ezra, Parshas Tzava, Chav Zayin, Chav Aleph, Neir Eseh, Kadmoinim Amru, Neir Echad Be'emtza, Va'ashisha Neirachim Zeh, Charzeh B'chatzi Igel. You have one in the middle and the 6 ones are arranged, one after the other in a half a circle. What does the Even Ezra mean? Some people say, oh, finally we have one source, like in the Arch of Titus, B'chatzi Igel. Rav Kasher in Torah Shlema, in his 22nd book, says, no, that's not what the Even Ezra means. If you study well the Even Ezra, actually the Magen Avram is right. The Even Ezra believes that it was like many of the Shabbos candelabras. But it wasn't a full circle around the round. It was a half a circle facing the middle branch. So it's a completely third way of depicting a menorah. I told you with Jewish history things get complicated. A completely original way. And this is how he may have interpreted the Sifri Zuta. And this is how the Even Ezra felt. This is what Rav Kasher feels, the Torah Shlema. This is how the Magen Avram explains it. So it's a completely different creature, let's put it this way, or completely different shape. So among the Rishonim, we have Rashi, Rambam, Ralbag, Rabbi Yosef, Chosher, all say Ba'alachsen, and the Even Ezra, who according to these interpretations doesn't even say it was round. He says it was a completely different type of candelabra where it was surrounding the middle branch. From the later generations, we have one of the great Kabbalists and also halachic authorities known as Rabbi Amnuel Chai Riki. And if you'll take a look in your next source, Maaseh Choshev. What's Maaseh Choshev? Maaseh Choshev is a book on the work of the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash. But Rabbi Amnuel Chai Riki, he was born in 1687. He actually was murdered in 1743. He wrote a very famous Kabbalistic work called Mishnas Chasidim. Mishnas Chasidim. Very, very great authority in halacha, in Kabbalah, and also in halacha. He wrote a commentary on Mishnah. It's called Hain Asher. He explains almost every Mishnah Kabbalistically. Interesting book, Hain Asher. In his book Maaseh Choshev, this is actually a source for the curved theory, for the half a circle, semicircular theory. And you can take a look, Maaseh Choshev Perek Zayin. He says, Nimshachim be'igul. It comes out in an eagle, in a circle. Medivrei Rashi b'chumash, the cause of Yotzim Ba'alachsen nira the lo yoya be'igul. From Rashi, it's obvious that's not true. So why am I arguing with Rashi? Avol, and here's the catch, this was written in the late 1600s, early 1700s, and he never went to Oxford, and even if he went, they wouldn't have let him into the Jewish manuscripts, and he would have even not known that the Rambam's manuscript is there because there was no catalog. Avol harambam b'chiburei lo yiskir tevas alachsoi. But the Rambam omits this word, because of nimshachim va'olim. He just says it goes out. It comes out of this central stem and goes up. It's also in the Brisa and in Gemara Menachos. Because of Bal Chachmas HaMishkan Shenirim is Eshoy Oilim HaKanim Kemat Bigel. And that's why there's a book before me known as Chachmas HaMishkan, printed in 1676 by a man named Rabbi Yosef Rikiti in Mantua in Italy. And he says that it was circular. I know Rashi disagrees, but the Rambam is the man of halacha, and the Rambam did not write Ba'alachson. The Rambam did not write Ba'alachson. He omitted it. He just wrote Nimshachim v'Oilin. We have to trust the Rambam and go with the sources of the Rambam. So I know I'm disagreeing with Rashi, but this is what the Chachmas HaMishkan wrote, Rabbi Yosef Rikiti, and this is what Rabbi Amnuel Chai Riki, also an Italian Jew, writes in his Maaseh Choshev. And he even adds in the next source, it's even logical. Because we have sources that the 7 branches correspond to the planets. and the 7 planets that they spoke about in those times, Shiva Koich Ve'Leches, so each branch is one of those planets. The planets are round. Ma'aseh Choshev. One source where he says clearly it was a semicircle, that's how it came out, so it looks at least somewhat like a planet. Comes the Lubavitcher Rebbe in a talk that he gave summer 1982, Likutei Sichos Chelik Chaf Aleph Truma. He writes, he says, Lefi ani is daiti. According to my humble opinion, may achar shebe ma'aseh choshev u'kosev behedya sheyisoidoi lefarish and meshachim beigel hu mistimas lashon Rambam bechibura. He says his source that it was semicircular comes from what? From the omission of the Rambam. That the Rambam did not use the word ba'alachsoin in his work Yad HaChazaka. Shemizen nire sheyu oilim kemat beigel. Harela achar shenizgale guf ksav yad kotcher shel Rambam etzir Menorah. Now, when we have the original handwritten depiction of the Rambam of the Menorah, ve'edusoy shel ben Rambam baza, and the testimony of his son, batal hayesoid ubatal habinyan. The son, his son testified that it was precise and meticulous, so the foundation on which he laid his theory is gone, the Rambam, because we have the manuscript of the Mishnah and we have the manuscript of the Yad HaChazaka. And actually, when the Rebbe said this, they didn't have yet the manuscript of the Yad HaChazaka, they only had the Mishnah. And then later he added that they found the manuscript of the Yad HaChazaka. Ubemechilas kvoi teirasan. With all due respect and honor to the greatness of the Ma'aseh Choshev and the Chachmas HaMishkan, who were truly great spiritual giants, ulefi ani is daiti. According to my opinion, nire barer, it seems clear. She'im ha'ma'aseh choshev ba'al chachmas ha'mishkan hayu royim es tziyurei shel Rambam u'pirusha shel Avram ben Rambam hayu gam koisvim she'en kol machlokas bazeh u'lekul alma hayu akanim b'yosher. If they would have seen what we see, they would have all agreed. So it's not even an argument. So the Rebbe is saying a bold statement. If they would have seen the evidence, they would have never said this, because the foundation is based on the fact that the Rambam is ambiguous, and therefore the natural inclination is to go be'igel. Of course, there's another big problem. According to the Ma'aseh Choshev, what about the middle one? If it's like the planets, so the middle one was also circular. Nobody says that. So we anyway have an issue. It's also hard to understand, since the Rambam doesn't say, why assume this over this? Why? When Rashi clearly says otherwise, it's hard to understand. It's not like kana means circular more than straight. That's also hard to understand. But certainly there's no omission from the Rambam, not in his Mishnah and not in his Yad HaChazaka. Take a look at your next source, page 4, Hagarin Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Reb Chaim Kanievsky has a commentary on the Brisa of the Mishkan. Brisa L'Mechza Mishkan. Let's see what Reb Chaim has to say. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, it's B'nai Brak. B'chol HaTziyurim. Mitsuyer Knei Menorah Agulim Ukinir Shoutos. Reb Chaim says, in all the pictures I see, everybody is making the menorah round. It seems like it's a mistake. Why? Rashi b'chumash kasav shayu balachsan. Why not accept Rashi? It was diagonal. V'shamati shekvar ha'iru bazeh. I heard that this was already spoken about. And in the Sefer Derech Chachma he writes again, ba'alachsan v'loy be'igol. V'cheinu Rashi b'chumash, v'cheinu b'tzira miyuchas l'Rabbeinu, v'chein kasav b'tshuvas ha'rivash simen tafyut, u'deloi kam et tzayrim be'igol. Reb Chaim here in both of his works says, this is Rashi, this is the picture of the Rambam, this is Tshuvas HaRivash, unlike those who are making the error according to Reb Chaim, where it is be'igol. So what do we have here? We have here that according to all these sources, all the Rishonim, it was Ba'alachsa. We have the Sifri Zutta and the Even Ezra who talk about circles, but according to many commentators, that means something else completely, that it was surrounding the middle stem, it didn't come up semicircle, which is very, very original and unique, no question. That opinion, a completely third opinion. We had the Ma'aseh Choshev and the Chachmas HaMishkan who actually said it was semicircular, but based on the omission of the Rambam, which we now know, the Rambam was actually very unambiguous and couldn't get more clear than in his depiction. And he wrote in both works, I'm making a picture. V'zu hitzurasa, I am making a picture. Okay, but what about the Arch of Titus? The Arch of Titus. I mean, if we go back to that Arch of Titus, right here, you could see it. It's very, very clear. This is not diagonal. This is round. So here comes in a new personality. You know who this is? This is Hagon Rebbe Yitzchak Isaac Halevi Herzog. Rav Herzog was the second chief rabbi of Israel. He was born in 1888, I believe in Lomza in Poland. The family then moved to England and then to Ireland. And he became the chief rabbi of Ireland, living in Dublin and in Belfast. Then he moved to Eretz Yisrael and he replaced Rav Kook. He became the second chief rabbi in Eretz Yisrael until his passing in 1959. Today's president of Israel is his grandson, whose name is Yitzchak, named after his grandfather. His father was Chaim Herzog, and this was his Zayda. They call him Buzi, Yitzchak. His name is Yitzchak, Isaac. He wrote a whole article on it. Now, he was a genius. He was also a historian. He wrote many interesting works of scholarship and of history. And he wrote in a magazine, it was called Sinai, I think in 1956, a few years before he passed away. He passed away in 1959. He wrote a whole article about this. And he asked this question. He says, what happened? Now, this is before the manuscript of the Rambam came out on the Mishnayos, before the manuscript of the Rambam came out on the Yad HaChazaka. Rashi was known always. Rashi was always there. So he says, this is the Menorah of the Beis HaMikdash. But Rav Herzog says, I have a big problem here. Forget for a moment the branches. We have a much, much bigger issue. And what is his bigger issue? If you take a look at the original picture of the Menorah, and you have it in your source sheets, you could see it up close. The Menorah, it's a little hard to see. I just made it very big. You see that picture on the base of the Menorah? You know what it is? It's a sea dragon. It's a sea dragon. We have a name for it in Mishnayos Avodah Zarah, Daf Mem Gimel, Darkoin. Daled Reish Kuv Vav Nun. You know what the Mishnah says? Mem Gimel Avodah Zarah. The Mishnah says if you find a vessel and it has on it the image of a dragon, you know what you should do with it? Yoilichem liyam hamelach. Take it to the salty waters, usually means the Mediterranean. Get rid of it. Why? This was a classic image of paganism, of idolatry. So Rav Herzog says, I don't understand. You're now going to tell me that the Menorah in the Beis HaMikdash had a dragon on it? When these vessels have to be thrown into the sea? So you'll say, no. If you assume it may have been depicted with that intention. But let's say it wasn't depicted with that intention. Who in their right mind would come, take the Menorah of the Beis HaMikdash, and make such an image on it? What is going on there? And you can't argue that is a dragon. That's what Rav Herzog asks. Especially, he says, in the Second Temple, Jews were very careful with Avodah Zarah, with idolatry. They knew what happened with the first Beis HaMikdash because of idolatry. The second Beis HaMikdash, they had other issues. They didn't get along with each other. But Avodah Zarah, they stayed away from. And here, the second Beis HaMikdash, Titus destroyed the second, not the first. There was a dragon on the Menorah? That's ludicrous. And then he says, what else? Take a look at the base of the Menorah. What's on the base? You see legs? No legs, right? Besides the fact that there's a double base. We saw the Rambam's picture. The Gemara clearly says the Menorah has legs. Clearly, Menachas Dav Chav Ches. The Braisa Melechus HaMishkan says it has legs. Rashi says, Rambam says, there's no legs. There's no zeich of a leg. What is going on there with our Menorah? This Menorah that they schlepped back, suddenly there's a dragon, suddenly there's no legs. If the artist was making a depiction, he did 7 branches. And even if you look at the branches closely, you see that he put in all these designs. But here too, it's completely different than the original Menorah. So for example, if you look at the middle branch, you don't have the 3 goblets on the top. If you look at the middle stem, you don't have the 3 apples. The branches that come out from the middle, they have to come out from a kaftar, they have to come out from an apple. You don't have it here. There's differences in the sizes of the flowers and the apples when in the original Menorah it was all uniform. One of the flowers is upside down, unlike the other flowers. It's not like the original Menorah. Another fascinating thing is, the base of this Menorah is around 1/3 from the height of the Menorah. In the original Menorah, what do Chazal tell us? The base was 3 tfachim out of 18. The whole menorah was 18 tfachim, around the height of a person, and the base was 3 tfachim. Here, the base is a third of the height of the menorah. What menorah are we talking about here? Rav Herzog's questions on this entire premise of this Beis HaMikdash menorah. So Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Halevi Herzog says, I have no choice, and I came up with a daring theory. And he himself calls it daring. He writes no'ezet. This is a theory that is no'ezet. It's a chutzpah theory, meaning it's daring, it's original. I have no source for it, but I'm stuck. And what's his theory? And actually, the Lubavitcher Rebbe said it over at a Fabrengen, and he said, Sa balabata shavart. It's like a classic balabata shavart. Rav Herzog says, I'll tell you what happened. They had to schlep the menorah from Jerusalem to Italy. It's a long journey. It's a long voyage. On the way, I'll tell you what happened. The entire base of the menorah fell off. They fell off. It comes to Rome, it's a balmum. This is Titus's pride. This is his joy. This is his grace and nachas. Because the menorah was a symbol. The menorah was the Jewish symbol. The Gemara even says the menorah was the Jewish symbol. And now, so I can imagine what he did to the guy who was responsible. But that we don't know. So Rav Herzog said, what happened? He's not going to go for a parade and march around the menorah, and you're like holding it from one branch, another branch, there's nowhere to hold it from. You're holding it from the central sticks, a pasnish. It's inappropriate. It's not geschmack, and certainly not for Rome, and not Titus's and Vespasian's Rome during this parade, which represented that Rome will rule the world for eternity, and Rome managed to vanquish Israel and its God, Chalila, etc. So what did he do? He gave it to Roman artisans, and he said, Chevra. He didn't use the word Chevra, but he says, guys, I want a perfect job, and I want a beautiful candelabra back in time for the parade. So they went, they took the menorah, and what did they do? They made their own base. Once they're making their own base, of course you put a dragon. That's their god. Of course, that's the label design. Of course you put a dragon. It's like not having sushi at a Jewish wedding. You're not yotza. They can have a menorah without a dragon. Once the base is there, he says there's no legs. It's a base the way they want to make it. It has a dragon. All the problems on the top. Okay, you have problems, but the big question of the dragon and the base and the disproportionate component of the base versus the menorah, I answered with my theory that this indeed is a false menorah. This part of the menorah. The upper half is the real menorah. The lower half is the fake menorah. Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Halevi Herzog. This is all based on the premise that he needs to say that this is the Beis HaMikdash's menorah. And therefore the menorah was curved. But if we go back to our own sources, Rashi doesn't even believe this is the menorah. The Rambam doesn't believe this is the menorah. Ralbag not, Bechar Shar not. The pictures of the Rambam not. What would the Rambam do here? What would the Rambam and Rashi answer if you showed this to them? How would they deal with it? So on one level they would say, I don't know, go to Rome and figure it out. I mean, we know this is Balachsa, and however Rashi and Rambam determined it, based on the truth of the tradition that they received, either from generation to generation, either from Chazal sources, either from their interpretation of Kana. You have a question, you have a question. That's on one level. But the truth is, it's very possible to say something maybe even simpler. And that is, maybe this was not the menorah that burnt in the Heichel, in the Beis HaMikdash, that the Kohen kindled every single night, every single evening, Bein HaArbayim, B'halas Aranas Aneres Bein HaArbayim. It was a different menorah. Then you got no issue with the dragon. Then you got no issue with all the other differences. It was a completely different menorah that this artist depicted in the Arch of Titus. Even though it was made close to the Churban Beis HaMikdash, and he was obviously copying the menorah of the Beis HaMikdash to some degree because it has 7 branches and it has designs, that's true. But to say that this was a copy from the original menorah in the Heichel, that's what they copied, maybe not. The Arch of Titus doesn't give Mara Mekaimas, and the artist and the engraver, the sculptor, did not have the authority of the Rambam and Rashi to know exactly what the menorah looked like. Perhaps, and this was a suggestion that was made in a talk on this, a very extensive sicha, talk that the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, gave a number of years ago in the 80s, 1982 and then 1983. The menorah was such an icon, it was such a symbol, people were making menorahs. That's why in archaeological discoveries, you will see menorahs. It became a symbol, it became an icon. And those who were worshiping idols also copied the menorah. It was impressive, it was brilliant, it was engaging, it was interesting. So this became something that people would make. And they would copy the menorah to some degree not, some degree, yeah, they didn't have that precision or that sensitivity or that meticulous, they couldn't care about Allah. It wasn't an issue of what God wants, what Moshe said, what alachsin is, what a kun is. It was a menorah for beauty, very often from a perspective of a craftsman or a designer. The semicircle may be more interesting and more engaging than the diagonal, which could sometimes look bland, depends what type of taste you have, what type of person you have. If you're a square, if you're a circle, if you're a diagonal person, you'll ask your wife. That's very possible. So this became an icon, even if the Avodah Zarah made the menorah, and maybe they had a menorah that was made. It was brought there. They made the picture based on this. It's also possible many other menorahs were made like this. And you know what? I was doing some research here, and I came across I came across this. I don't know how I came across it, but I came across it somewhere. Take a look at this. You see? Looks like an innocent barrel, right? You see that picture? You see the picture that I... So historians say that's a menorah. Now, you know what this barrel is unique for? It says on this barrel that it's being dedicated for Asherah. Asherah is the classic tree that was planted to worship as a god. Loisita Asherah, we have it in Tanakh, we have it in Gemara, Mishnayos. This barrel was dedicated for the Asherah. So this was not a Jewish thing. And what's the picture they have on it? They have their little menorah. You could see this little menorah. This is very powerful demonstration of the fact that the menorah becomes a symbol and an icon. It's used by many people in many different situations. But let's go further. Why would this be paraded in Rome? Was Josephus so ignorant and so foolish and he got a completely wrong menorah and was maybe just the menorah of a plumber in Jerusalem? Or the menorah of some other pagan guy in Jerusalem that he schlepped? Was this a way that Jews deceived him? Maybe. All these things are possibilities. We don't know. Is it possible they gave him the wrong menorah? Is it possible he wanted a different menorah or he just didn't care? There may be also another element. The Beis HaMikdash itself had only one menorah. How many menorahs did the Beis HaMikdash itself have? There was one menorah that we're talking about inside the Heichal, contained in a room that was closed, that was locked at night, that was covered with a roof, that nobody was allowed to go into, nobody besides a Kohen doing the Avodah. No tourists were allowed into the Heichal. Nobody was allowed where the menorah was. That was one menorah. That's the unique menorah that was kindled every day in the Beis HaMikdash, every evening, Rashi, Rambam, evening, morning in the Beis HaMikdash. But what about the Mishnah in Sukkah Daf Nun Aleph? Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, what did they have? Menorahs, candelabras. Tall, beautiful candelabras that they used to light, and the whole Jerusalem was lit up from those menorahs. What shape were those menorahs in? We don't know. We don't know. Those were outside of the Heichel. Those were actually in the Azorah, in the Ezras Nashim, where men and women and children could go. They even had balconies for the women. I was giving a lecture, this is just in parentheses. A number of years ago, I was giving a lecture somewhere, so there were questions and answers. So there was somebody said, what is your opinion about the kotel, about prayer by the Western Wall? Should there be a mechitza? Should there be a segregation between men and women? So I said, yeah. So the person got very upset at me and said, you seem much more tolerant and much more progressive and much more liberal. I said, I'm sorry for disappointing you, that I'm not so progressive. But why is this not progressive? She said, that means women, it's disgusting, we're second-class citizens. I said, yeah, meet my mother. Meet my mother-in-law, meet my wife, you'll see if they're second-class citizens by us. But it's not nice, why do you need segregation? So I don't know, sometimes Hashem pops something into you. I say, why do you think that place is a good place to pray? Like, what's the big deal? Like, why not in your basement or on your porch, or in Zimbabwe or New Zealand or in St. Moritz? Like, why there? She says, what do you mean? It's the place of the temple. It's where my ancestors prayed. It's for thousands of years. This is the place of the divine presence, and this is where they prayed. And so I said, so I want to honor them. So I said, do you know how they did it? Do you know how they did it? So I'll tell you. We have a record in the Talmud, Tractate Sukkah. They built a balcony in a section called the women's section so that there should be boundaries between the men and the women. So if you're so honoring this place, why don't you just allow the tradition of 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago to continue? It's like, oh, nobody ever said that. But that's where these menorahs were. They were outside in the Azara. Maybe, we don't know what they looked like. Maybe to distinguish them from the main menorah in the Heichel, maybe they were made in a completely different shape and also had to be done with many other differences because you're not allowed to, there's a Mishnah, you're not allowed to, it's a halacha. In Gemara and in Rambam and in Yeridea, you're not allowed to build the Tavnas HaMenorah. We're not allowed to build a menorah, a replica of the Beis HaMikdash menorah. If it's a different number of branches, it's fine, like 8 or 5 or 6, that's fine. So there has to be differences anyway. Significant differences. And maybe to distinguish, maybe they made it round. Now that would be very respectful for Titus. In fact, let me ask you a question. How many people do you think saw the original menorah? The real menorah in the Heichel? How many people? Almost nobody. Unless you knew where to stand. You knew where to stand when the doors were open and the menorah was in the right position. There's an argument if the menorah went from Durham to Tzafon or Mizrach to Ma'ariv. If it was from east to west or if it was from south to north. From east to west, it would have been even harder to see it. But if you were in the right position, the doors were open and you stood, Ezras Yisrael, and you could see, you may get a glimpse of the menorah, but from pretty far. Unless you were a Kohen who went into the Heichel to do the service, and there was one who went in every morning and every evening. A few who went in to do the Avodah there. But that's it, nobody else. If Titus is making a parade to embarrass and denigrate the Jewish people, which menorah would he want to promote? The one that everybody saw? Hundreds of thousands of Jews saw constantly, every Sukkot or other times? Or the menorah that almost nobody saw? Which one do you think would be more embarrassing? The one that became an icon, a symbol, perhaps it was one of those. Take a look in Al Nissim. I just thought of it as I was preparing. What do we say in Al Nissim when we speak about Hanukkah? Very strange thing. Pinu es heichalecha, tiaru es mikdashecha, v'idliku neiros, b'chatzrois kodshecha. They lit candles in the courtyard of your holy place. We don't light the menorah in the chatzar. That's not the case. The menorah is in the Heichel, which is indoors, with walls and a roof, and it was closed. And it was guarded and protected. And it was a quarantined place. Nobody was allowed to go into the Heichel. The Heichel is not the Chatzar. The Chatzar is the Azar. It's the courtyard. It's outside of the Heichel. And that was outdoors. That's where the outer altar was. That's where the washing basin was. That's where people would come to bring offerings. And there were different sections for Kayanim, for Yisrael, and for men, for women. There were different sections. That's a whole other discussion. Meseches Tamid, Meseches Midas, Rambam Beis Habchira. Why vidliku neiros b'chatzros katshecha? Very hard to understand. Unless there was some menorahs that were in the courtyard that they didn't light it in the chatzah, they light it inside. Some Sefer asked this question, others ask it. It's very difficult. Whoever wrote the Al Nissim, come on, how do you vidliku neiros b'chatzros katshecha? But it's interesting, he doesn't mention Al Nissim, the miracle of the menorah. He's not talking about the menorah. He's talking about lights that they lit to celebrate the occasion outdoors, like by Simchas Beis HaSheva. I took a look today, there's a book called Josephus, Sefer Yosifun. Josephus was a priest. He fought the Romans in the north, and then he became an accomplice. He surrendered to them, he became an accomplice. He was a brilliant man and a writer. Titus took him in, and he became the Roman official historian. He wrote the books Milchamas HaYehudim, Antiquities of the Jews, the Wars of the Jews, and the book Josephus. Chapter 95 of Yosifun, I see a line, and this is what he says, and you have it in your source sheet. Yosifun Perek Tzaddik Hey, page 4 in your source sheet, second to the last source. Be'esahi bal titus Yeshua Chaim ben Shapsoya Chaim Gadol v'himoy shtei menoris mimenoris hazav ashahaya b'mikdash v'kol hashulchanos hazav v'yitenes kol ela letitus. A man came to Titus, his name was Yeshua, Joshua the high priest, the son of the high priest. You know what he has? He brings him 2 menorahs from the golden candelabras in the Beis HaMikdash. 2. Why 2? Where are these two from? That's what Josephus is. Oh, who's Josephus? We're going to start relying on this Jew who became a Roman. It's true, Josephus you can't always rely on. But if there's no intentional, what we call in halacha mesiach lefitumai, if there's no intentional issue, then maybe you may be able to rely on it. It's very interesting. He brings two candelabras. What are these two? It's hard to know. Is this one of the menorahs from the courtyard? Is it from the Heichel? Is it not from the Heichel? Why were there two? Maybe something else. The Rambam in Hilchos Beis HaBchira, chapter 8, writes that every single morning, the guards in charge of protecting the Beis HaMikdash, Isha Rabbi is the man in charge, would walk around with torches of fire early morning to make sure everything is fine and everything is set up for the morning service. What about Shabbos morning? The Rambam says you're not supposed to carry avukos shalor, you're not supposed to carry candles. Now there's a question in the Beis HaMikdash, ain't shvus b'mikdash, a separate question, but what happens on Shabbos morning? So what does the Rambam say? The Rambam says there were shtei neiros. They had outside two neiros, two lamps, two candelabras where they had burning flames, and that's what they would do it with. They wouldn't have to carry it around. So here we see, besides Simchas B'Sasheva, besides the story of Hanukkah, we have a whole other issue that every Shabbos they had something. Were these the Menorahs Hazov that they brought to Titus? We don't know. Nobody says. It's not clear. But to come and say for sure that Titus had the Menorah of the Heichel, and this will prove that they were semicircular, which Rav Herzog wanted to do, and that's why he came up with the theory that the base was lost and had to be interchanged. There's absolutely no conclusive evidence that that's the case, even though it could be one of the theories. According to this, when you look at the archaeological discoveries, even from the Second Temple, and you see round menorahs, yeah. There were round menorahs, there were icons, there were symbols. Were they a copy from the Beis HaMikdash? Not a copy. Were they a copy from different menorahs? Was it a similar copy? Was it a copy when it wasn't perfect? You see in all of these archaeological discoveries, they don't have all the picture aspects in there. They don't have the base, they don't have the legs, they don't have the goblets. We're not going to conclude that the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash didn't have these things. These were just engravements that people did in their homes or shuls. Maybe it was even people who did not have the authority, who didn't even do it in the right way. Either yad and isht. And then, a few years ago, soldiers had to catch terrorists in a town near Hebron it's an Arab town called Kfar Sa'ir. And one of the soldiers comes in, and what does he see? This is a city of Jews from the time, even before the Gemara, the end of the Beis HaMikdash. Look, you see this? Interesting. Here is another depiction, someone engraved in this house near Hebron. What type of menorah? Diagonal. Now, I'm not going to say I know who it is. I was thinking, should I tell you it was a Kohen who was in the Heichel, and he had a vacation house in Hebron, and he knew what the menorah really looked like. I'm not going to tell you that because I don't know anything of that. But you see clearly, this was also a menorah at the time. And then I take a look, and I see, look at this guy. Historians say this was another image of a menorah, diagonally. So even though we don't have evidence this way or that way, Reb Chaim Kanievsky's point, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's point, Rabbi Yosef Kapach's point, Reb Shapsi Frankel's point is that we have Rashi and the Rambam, the two greatest authorities in Judaism, who told us what the menorah looked like. Very clearly, unambiguously. Take a look, page 4, fourth to the last source. Page 4 to the last source. Look at this. If it's true, this is a humble way of saying, if all of this is true, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, if it's true, wouldn't it be appropriate that all those who are depicting an image of the menorah to show what it looked like in the Beis HaMikdash and in the Mishkan should do it the way Rashi said it was and the way the Rambam said it was? It's still a little difficult with Rome, so I just want to throw in another fascinating piece of history. This has to do with another story connected to the tzitz. This was the forehead plate on the Kohen Gadol's forehead that he wore. Says the Gemara, Shabbos Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis, and it's also in Maseches Sukkah. Tzitz. Kimin kashel zav reichav shtei etzbais mukaf meizin leizin v'kasav alav beis shitten yud hey l'mayla v'kodesh lamed lamata. The tzitz came from one ear to another ear. It was made of gold. It was the width of 2 fingers. And on 2 lines it said, Kodesh Lashem. On the top, it said Yud Hey, which is Hashem. On the bottom it said Kodesh Le. So when you looked at the tzitz, on the bottom it said Kodesh, holy too, and on top Hashem, Yud Ke. Amar Rebbe Lezer Rebbe Yosi. No. Ani re'isiv be'ir roimi v'kasav Kodesh Lashem b'shita achas. You don't know what you're talking about. I was in Rome. I saw the tzitz. Remember in the beginning we learned to Avos the Rebbe Nosson says the tzitz is in Rome. I saw it. It was in one line. Now, if you were the halachic authority and you had to determine what the tzitz looked like, which opinion would you take? Logically, who would you choose? The man says, I saw it. Rebbe Lezer, Rebbe Yosi. So you take a look in the Rambam, Hilchas Klei HaMikdash. The Rambam says, how do you make the tzitz? 2 lines. Kodesh, 1 line, La, that line, Hashem up. And he says, however, if you made it with 1 line, it's kosher. In fact, Pa'amim kasvu b'shita achas. There was even a time that they did it in 1 line. So Rabbeinu Menachem HaMeiri says, I don't know, why didn't the sages retract their opinion? They knew Rebbe Lezer's on, and you're not talking about an Arch of Titus, where you have Titus, you have his brother Domitian, another son of Yisrael anti-Semit, trying to defeat the Jewish people, and they're engraving an image from someone who brought a menorah that they believe is in the basement. Rebbe Lezer, Rebbe Yosi is a Tana. He's telling you, I saw it. So the Meiri says, next source, Afal Pisha Migdolei HaChacham Meidu, Ani Re'isiv B'roimi, Lo Yichishu Es HaYadua Etzlam Af Be'edus Re'iyah. The Chachamim knew what the halacha was. They knew how the tzitz had to be written. He says he saw it, okay. They didn't think he was a liar, but they're not going to retract. And that's what the Rambam accepts. But why? The Chachamim are going to say, you saw something. Now give me context. Is it possible that somebody made a replica of the tzitz? Is it possible that the tzitz was an interesting icon that people wanted to copy? Is it possible that there was a Jewish conspiracy to hide the real tzitz? Maybe yeah, maybe not. Maybe you saw the real tzitz. We have a source that this is the tzitz. This is Torah Emes. Rebbe Lezer Rebbe Yosi didn't have that source. He says, no, I have to go according to my vision. This is how the Meiri explains it. This is even when you have testimony from a Jewish sage who says, I saw it. With the Menorah, we don't have that. We don't have Rebbe Lezer coming and saying, I saw in Rome the Menorah of the Beis HaMikdash. We have a Menorah depicted on the arch that has branches in a particular way with a dragon, and now we need to figure out which Menorah that was. And now the theories abound.
Don't we have Reb Shimon? Reb Shimon says, Allah.
He doesn't say it was round. He says they were facing the middle one. Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah. Shimon says the menorah was in Rome. No, he saw the menorah, not the picture of the menorah. Yeah.
But the real menorah, not the chutz.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it looks like it, yeah. He says, I saw the menorah and it was facing the middle. That's what Reb Shimon said. Over there, too, I should mention, there's a commentary on Buha de Sifri by Rav Nachem Zemba, who was killed in the Warsaw Ghetto, one of the greatest Goinim in Poland. And he says that this is what the Sifri Zuta says, and it argues with a medrash that says the menorah was hidden. But assuming the menorah was taken to Rome, what happened to that menorah? Where's the menorah? Assuming the tzitz was also taken to Rome. Same thing with the tzitz. And the Chachamim still held on to their tradition. And here we come to closure. For starters, you have to love the Jewish people. 2,000 years later, we're debating the shape of the menorah. But this is what the Jewish people are. The menorah is alive in our imagination, in our souls, in our hearts, like the Beis HaMikdash is alive in our imagination, in our souls, in our hearts, in our prayers, in our experiences, in our spiritual lives. The Jews miss the menorah, yearn for the menorah, love the menorah, and therefore debate what the menorah looked like, what it didn't look like, what are the sources, what is not a real source, what is a real source. But here there's one more thing that was very moving to me, and I want to share this with you. And then I want to add a few words just of my own imagination, my own explanation of it, at least from my own humble perspective. Till now, it just seems like a real question of Metzius, reality. What was the reality of the menorah? And the fact that all these Gdolei Yisrael argue, that Rashi and the Rambam, the greatest authorities of how to interpret Torah, tell you what the menorah looked like. That's what should be embraced enthusiastically, wholeheartedly, even if there may be a question here or a question there, especially in context of everything we spoke about. The question is, does it really matter outside of it? Halachically, when you're making your Hanukkah menorah, you can make any type of Hanukkah menorah. When you're making a picture of the menorah, you can make any picture of the menorah you want. So the truth is, as the Rebbe said, it should be the real thing. It should be like the Beis HaMikdash, granted. But in this talk of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he added one more very emotional component, which I thought is worthwhile to share with you. And it's going to be in your next source. It's in Likutei Sichos Chelik Chaf Aleph Truma. The Rebbe said this in a Sicha, Shabbos Matas Masei Dvarim, 1982, Tavshem Mem Beis, and it's printed here in Likutei Sichos Truma Chaf Aleph. It's in Yiddish. I want to read it. You have it here on your screen. And I'll translate a few paragraphs. The Tzir HaRagel von der Menorah, as the Sheiches HaKam sein wie Chatzoi Keshes, is al pi HaShara, an Nachmachung von dem Tzir HaMenorah, was nicht Iden auf Metzeige wenn Beräumi, und auf der Nitzachen Arke. That's good Yiddish. Der Shar Nitzachen von Titus Yemach Shemai. We can assume that what made this circular picture of the menorah so famous was the picture of the menorah on the Arch of Titus, which was designed in Rome by non-Jews on the portal of victory of Titus, of Titus. Wenn Titus Arash hat Charav gemacht der Beis HaMikdash, hat geheißen, wegzunehmen Klei HaMikdash und sie bringen kein Räum. Und die Quaidoi von dem Rasha hat man in Räum gebeut a Schar Nitzachen, was tragt sein Namen Schar Titus. Und auf dem Schar hat man mit zeigen werden, wie man tragt die Gefangene Klei HaMikdash und beteuchen dem Menorah und im Zier von dem Menorah von Schar Titus an die Sheshes HaKanim wie Chatzoi Keshes. When Titus destroys the Beis HaMikdash, he brings back the vessels to Rome. The Gemara says in Gittin, he went into a boat, he brought back the vessels, Gittin Daf Nun Vav. In his honor, they made for this wicked person a portal of victory, a Shar of victory, the Arch of Titus. There they make a picture of them carrying the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash, including the menorah where you have these semicircular branches. Was neusef auf dem, as the Tzir HaMenorah of Shar Titus is klar nicht meduyek, Idach das getan geworden, kemovan, kedei herauszubringen, der Schlitte und Herrschaft von Räum über jeden Rachman al-Islam. Bis als man dort euch ausgekritzt bekamen, bekam de Wörter, Judäa kapta. Jehuda ist gefangen. Und es eine gewinns Mannen, wenn man vielleicht machriach sein, jeden zu kommen zu dem Schar. Sie sollen sehen, was dort ist geschrieben und gezeichnet, bechdei zu der Niederiken, v'chuli v'chuli. The whole point of this arch was built to demonstrate the defeat of Judea, the victory of Rome. And in fact, his brother made a coin. This is another fascinating piece. He made a coin. Take a look at this coin. You see what it says? Judea kapta. You know what that means? Judah is in captivity. Judah was captured. And take a look at the other side of the coin. This is Vespasian who destroys the Beis HaMikdash. And look at the image in Judea kapta. What do you see? On one side of a tree, a Jew is sobbing. On the other side of the tree is the Roman soldier dominating him. This was their image. Judea kapta. And that was the whole point of the arch. So the Rebbe says, Kumtois, as das Mitzayah sein, die Knei HaMenorah, wie Chatzoi Keshes, wie seine Mitzayah of Shar Titus, darf rausgerufen, a Gewaltgeschrei, Neuse v'gam zikir, wo das ist Hepech Rashi, wo Rambam v'chuli, euch weil das gibt a gewissen Heskem v'chuli, Chas v'sholem v'rachman al-Itzlan, zu dem Zier of Shar Titus, was ist gemacht geworden, gedei zum Mitzayah sein, Iden und sie niederig machen. So here the Lubavitcher Rebbe in his vintage style says there's another very emotional element here. We're going to use the Arch of Titus to tell us what our menorah should look like. When this entire menorah was engraved, to tell us that our history is done, we're finished, we're vanquished. Besides the fact that it's antithetical to Rashi and the Rambam. These are our people, these are our sages. It's almost like this is what we're going to embrace, an image that comes from a place that its entire Reizan Dietra was in order to mock, to denigrate, to put down the Jewish people. Tmura zeh, was hat Zier von dem Menorah darf dem Mann und Menorah sein, als ein Tafkid ist zu sein, lo oir goyim, eidus hi lechol boi oilam shashchina scheure bei Yisrael, wer die Zures haben Menorah gemacht, bei von Kazeh, was der Mann dem Hepech mamisch. Wie Roim hat men hat Seyach gewende Yidin Rachman al-Itzlan. He says, what is the real focus of the Menorah? The menorah is there to remind the Jew that his or her job is to be la'or goyim, to create light in the whole world, to be the light for all the nations, to be the divine beacon of moral clarity, light, hope, love, truth, authenticity, holiness, integrity to the entire world. Like the Gemara says, this is the testimony to the whole world that the Shekhinah dwells among Yisrael. That's what the menorah brings out in the Jew. That's what the menorah represented. And by the way, and this is parenthesis, I'm going to give it only 40 seconds. In all the pictures of the Rambam, there's something very, very strange. What is it? The goblets are upside down. You remember? You saw this? Take a look. Even Rav Kapach says, over here, the Rambam was working very fast. He wasn't meticulous. But Rav Kapach, with all due respect, in every picture of the Rambam, he has the goblets upside down. Why couldn't he make the goblets regularly? They were called Kaisis Alexandrian cups. They're narrow on the bottom, broad on the top, but the Rambam turns them over. To say that 22 times the Rambam made this mistake. Why? He couldn't do it the other way. 22 times in all of the pictures that we have, including the original manuscript. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, following this perspective, says, this is what the Rambam felt really. Either, again, he had a medrash or he had a tradition, and the logic behind it is, because the whole point of the menorah is to be a source of light. You have a barrel where you keep water or a drink, a beverage. What's the purpose of a cup? Not to keep it in the cup, to drink it. How do you drink a cup? You turn it over. You turn it over. That's how you get the water down into the system. The purpose of the menorah was to hydrate the world, to illuminate the world, to spread light in the world. So the Rambam made the goblet this way. So now back to the discussion of the Arch of Titus. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says, this menorah, which is supposed to be made, and which is supposed to inspire this purpose, mission statement of the Jew, to be la'or goyim, as the Navi Yeshaya says, you're a light unto the nations. It reminds us the moment when they were telling the Jewish people, your light is extinguished, God forbid forever. Judea kapta. And if I may add, both collectively and individually, I think this represents a general mindset of how we live. A general mindset of how we think about ourselves. Neir Hashem nishmas adam. Everybody is a menorah. Everybody is a candelabra. And here, we always have to ask a very, very deep question. Who's going to tell me what my menorah is supposed to look like? Everybody is a menorah. You, me, all of us. Everyone is a menorah. Everybody is a source of light for yourself and for your world, for your loved ones and for the world, for the Jewish people and for the world. La'or goyim, a light for the nations. And it begins with your own light. Neir Hashem nishmas adam, a light inside yourself. Like the menorah was burning and then it radiated light outside of the heichal as well through the windows. And you have to ask the question, who tells me, who dictates what my menorah is going to look like? What type of light I'm going to give out? What chemistry? What structure? What curvatures or lack of them will my menorah possess? Sometimes, sadly, Rome tells us what our menorah is going to look like. And this is the message here. Rashi and Rambam tell you what a menorah looks like. Rashi and Rambam represented purity, truth, holiness, integrity, authenticity. Let them tell you what your menorah is supposed to be, how your light can shine and should shine. But sometimes, Titus, Vespasian, Domitian, or the other people who built this arch can psychologically and emotionally dictate to me what my menorah is going to look like. Sometimes Rome tells me how to kindle my menorah, and sometimes the message is homiletically, I need to go in circles. I need a curve. I need to cut corners. My curvature has to become bent. My menorah has to become crunched. My height, my structure has to be caved in. I have to become emotionally or spiritually or psychologically hunchback. Rome is going to tell you what your menorah should look like. Somebody asked me in the beginning of the class, Rabbi, why? How are you going to connect this to emotional healing? How? Like, you're going to do like just history? So I said, Hashem will help me. I don't mean here the physical realm. What happens to us? Stories we tell ourselves, the stories other people tell us. Sometimes influence consciously or unconsciously what our own menorah looks like, and we become a bent menorah. A menorah bent out of shape, going in circles, beating around the bush, scared of confronting and facing our kaima skufa v'oilech eschem kaimamiyas, to be straight. B'kaima skufa b'alachzayin. Don't let anybody define your menorah. Not consciously and not unconsciously. Let Rashi define it. Let the Rambam define it. Let Moshe Rabbeinu define it. Let the Rebbe let your soul define the power, the depth, the greatness of your candelabra, of your source of light for yourself and others. We live in a generation that people often allow their menorahs to be eclipsed, to be covered over, to be blocked. Not their fault. It's what we're used to. If I'm spending so much time in my psychological realm, what else do I know about? Titus defines what my menorah is going to look like. Stand straight. Don't bend to try to fit in. The world wants your full light. But I think, as important as it is individually, this is also very, very important collectively. One of the greatest tragedies of modern Jewish history is that we look to Rome and whatever Rome represents to tell us what our menorah is supposed to look like. Instead of Rashi and the Rambam, instead of Moshe Rabbeinu and God, we look to Rome to agree that our light is kosher, that our menorah is the right menorah, that we're going to do it the right way. Instead of the Jewish people understanding La'or Goyim Nesaticha, you were chosen to be a moral light unto the nations of the world. And even as we're in exile and we were exiled, but the inner menorah of the Jewish people burns brightly. That's the whole reason for anti-Semitism. When it comes to an issue like the land of Israel and why we're in the land of Israel, and defeating the enemies who want to destroy the land of Israel, when the Jewish people learn to be a menorah that's not curved, that's not bent, that's not suppressed, that's not repressed, that's not crushed, but one that shines brightly with authenticity, it's light. It's not embarrassed of the truth. It's not embarrassed to tell the world. It's not a joke that God gave a land to the Jewish people. It's not a joke. It's not a comedy thing. It's not up for a UN vote. It's a real thing. It's as authentic as the sunrise in the morning and even more authentic. It's not even ours to give away. It's an eternal gift of the Creator of the world to the Jewish people, absolutely and unequivocally. The world respects this. The world is eager to hear a message of clarity, of morality, of authenticity in this and in every other aspect. After 1,954 years, the Jewish people are ready for the return of the real menorah and to be able to light it, illuminating ourselves and the entire world with the eternal light of the Geula, of the redemption with Mashiach Tzidkenu. May it be speedily and now at this Tisha B'Av. Amen. Thank you.
Rabbi Jacobson, can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
How is it
Even
that
two.
Rashi and Rambam,
Yeah.
seemingly we don't have a makar for what they...
Right. So how did the Rambam and Rashi know this? So it could be a few things. Could be that they interpreted the word kana.
Right.
I said kana. Shisha knei menorah kana. Usually in Tanakh means a straight line.
Right.
Or they had a source, a medrash that never reached us. Yeah, that's also possible. Because we have such.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. B'chavod yishtabach shmo. Yeah. Chazak u'barach.
If the menorah was a crown and a circle,
That's the Even Ezra and this.
the Magen Avraham, how is there a machlekes if it's facing one way or another way? It's a circle. It can't face one.
Right. So apparently he asked. That's not the only problem. It says in Gemara we have clearly that the candles were in a line. So that's a bigger problem. But the Even Ezra has his way of interpreting Chumash. It's his own unique way. He sometimes differs from the Chazal. No, Rashbam holds Vayerev Vayivoike Shabbos starts in the morning, not at night. Rashbam and Chumash holds it start. Saying there's different ways of interpreting. So Allah, we don't accept Even Ezra. But I would say even Even Ezra is not posing a challenge because he's not even saying this. He's saying a completely different theory. The Magen Avraham has a commentary on Medrash called Zayis Ranon, a fresh olive. Parshas Baloischa, the Magen Avraham says this.
He said it was the crown.
He explains the Sifri Zuta. And Rav Kasha and Torah Shlema says that's what Even Ezra means. It's obvious that's what he means, that it was around and around. It can't be exactly because Herzog says it was a full crown. Even Ezra says it was a half a crown. So if you looked up, it looked like a half a moon. The whole menorah looked like a half a moon, like a Shabbos leichter with a middle and around it halfway are 6 branches. It was an interest.
But it's not.
No, nobody says that. In Gemara, you already have not that. So it's the Ibn Ezra's interpretation in Chumash. Some say Reb Sadia Gaon also held that. So the Knesset used the symbol based on the Arch of Titus.
I'm saying
The symbol of Israel, the Knesset, they used the Arch of Titus.
Israel runs today.
And that's what, I think that's part of what upset the Rebbe. That's what they were using. Actually, you have Herzog also, who was a chief rabbi, also criticizes that. Why are you using that when the second half is completely fabricated? Because even he holds the second half is fabricated.
why when they're recreating the kelim, they're using the base like that?
I think people are just used to the round and it's just entrenched that this is the way it is, but it's not. Anybody who does, you see it's not.
The base, for sure.
I mean, Rav Herzog held that it was, but he didn't see the manuscripts of whoever saw the later manuscripts. Right away said you have Rambam and Rashi. There was one person who wrote. There is the man who he heads Machan HaMikdash, Rav Ariel. So he argues that from all the archaeological discoveries, most of them are round, and therefore you have to go with round. Rashi says alachsen. He says that in Greek, alachsen could mean round, and Rashi knew Greek. It's a nice theory, but Rashi in Chumash, when he uses the word alachsen, he means diagonal. For example, when you sprinkle the blood, he says you sprinkle it one corner and then you do balachsen. And when Rashi writes words in another language, he says it's a different language. So he doesn't say balachsen in Greek. So it's a far-fetched theory.
I still think Rashi doesn't. It's not mechich one way or another in Rashi because alachsen. Rashi was trying to explain the minute, right? So this is the mishamash, yeah. Yotzim b'tzida.
Like a shin. No?
Rashi is trying to say that it's not like this, right? But then you're going to say, so Rashi has evolution, right? So Rashi is saying, where's Rashi?
Parshas Truma.
Yeah, Rashi
The
is
first,
saying,
second one, yeah.
Yotzim b'tzida lekan lekan.
Yeah.
But don't think it's straight.
Right.
Balachsen, and don't think, and then so you're saying it doesn't have to say balachsen, say lekan lekan.
Yeah. The word balachsen is completely superfluous.
But Rashi is trying to say that it's not like this. It's not far. It's coming to the top, but it's long. Alachsen means that it has to be. It's round.
But I'm saying usually when you say alachsen in Rashi, you could look. It means diagonal. It means
It
straight.
means straight diagonal. It means he's trying to say like this.
Inclined.
That's what it
It means not straight. Don't think the Menorah Yotzim Mitzvah.
The Moshe by the Mizbeach, he says you sprinkle Shtayim Sheinar, but actually says you sprinkle the blood on one corner. Ukenegda balachsen.
It means that the blood has to be straight.
The other corner.
Across, but then it has to go straight. It can't go circle. Diagonal means that direction. That direction.
It's not curved. I mean, pashtus, huh?
Stam with the Rambam's thing, it's not straight. This stops. In this picture, it doesn't come.
Oh, you mean it doesn't come all the way to the top?
That's my question. Alle pictures.
I mean, of course,
Ständig sich
the Ruf said
I
that.
see.
The Ruf said that.
That's how
the
Rashi
Rambam-
says
that
it.
The Rambam. So the Rambam says, don't quote, don't.
Right.
The Ruf said it like that, but still, in the picture,
I hear.
it can't. And then how would the oil light in the diagonal way? It had to be.
No,
some way
everybody. I think.
straight
Yeah.
For the oil to stand straight.
Not to fall out. You see. And at the end it was straight. Yeah.
Oh, so how is it?
L'cha'ira. Or I think actually I saw two opinions about that. That it straightened out, or that they centered the bazichin, whatever the cup they put in, that they centered. That they had to center.
So
That had to be straight, if not the
Rambam and
oil.
Rashi both were masking that they took it off.
That's another argument. If the containers were attached or not attached, that's a whole other argument.
Right, but the Rambam and Rashi both hold the same on that.
It's not so posh.
The cone's pointing down, the massive windows in the base of Mikdash. It's also a narrow on the inside.
It says chaloinus shkufim atumim. The windows were narrow on the outside, were narrow on the inside and wide on
So
the.
match the cone's pointing down.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah, the Rebbe said that because Rashi says usually you make a window because you want the light to come in, so you make the window broad on the inside,
Right.
narrow on the outside so the light spreads. But here the point was the light should go out, so you made the windows narrow on the inside and broad on the outside.
That's why the cones are facing down.
Yeah. It's a Rashi Menachas daf Pevav. Yeah. It's interesting that the Rambam turned over the Gvir.
Yeah.
That's like unique.
This is the idea. That's why I
Yeah.
turned it over.
Yeah.
Der Rambam geschrieben, sagt jetzt für Juden, ich hab nicht
Alt Xaviat.
verstanden, es gehalten, nein, beschreiben.
Alt Xaviat, ja. Man hat das auch. So da viele Madura kamen von der Sach von Mishnah Torah.
Das ist Copies von der Kisve, ja.
Und da genommen, hat gefunden in the Cairo Geniza, Schechter in the Cairo Geniza. They found a lot of manuscripts of the Rambam in Egypt. And also in Yemen they found.
But the Rebbe said B'chatzros is a rai that has to be Psimanis.
B'chatzos Kachecha, yeah.
So then it contradicts.
No, but not the Menorah in the Heichel. The Menorah in the Heichel had to remain inside.
After Hanukkah, the Rebbe says that they sinned it outside.
That the Chaim Sofer says that since had Lokak Sheda bizarre, so you could bring the Menorah outside and then put it back in. That's the Chaim Sofer's theory. That's why he says B'chatzos Kachecha. That's the Chaim Sofer's
He was
word.
answering the Messias of Kasha also. That was outside. He was then thicker knoiten because that was also the nest. That's why we say B'chatzos Kachecha.
Reb Tzvi Pesach Frag, the Rav of Yerushalayim, he tines the reason they made it 8 days, like the Beis Yosef, was because since you're not allowed to make a replica of the Menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, it would be 7 days, people would make 7 branch Menorahs and they could come to make a replica. So they made 8 days, l'chatchila, so nobody would make a replica of the Beis HaMikdash Menorah. Huh?
Today, people don't.
Yes, I'm saying.
The lach of 7 is also not.
You have to be careful. You have to be careful.
Das stimmt, dass man tun schon machen, also wie mit tun schon sieben hat.
No, man can send in zibben. But if it's building the structure of the Menorah that was likuva in the Beis Hamikdash, if it was likuva, something that had to be in the Beis Hamikdash, right? Yeah, but if it's something, right, that if you put it in your Menorah, you couldn't do it in the Beis Hamikdash, then you could do it. But it has to be something that it would have been a kosher Menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. If you make a Menorah with 7 branches, then you could use it even with the Yevet in the Beis Hamikdash. You're not allowed to. But if it's something you wouldn't be able to use in the Beis Hamikdash, doesn't have to be perfect. Yeah. For example, the Rambam not likuva. For example, a Menorah has to be gold. But if you don't have gold, you can make from other metals. But then the Rambam says you don't have to have all the gviyim and the kaftorim if you do other metals. The Chashmonaim didn't have a Menorah. The Gemara says, what did they do? They took 8 shpudin. They took shpudin. Shpudin are like spits, sticks, yeah. Spizen, yeah. They took 8 shpudin, and that's what they used. The Gemara says, shpudin shalates, it was wood. Another shit, it wasn't wood. They covered it with, it was really metal, and then they got wealthier. They used silver, they got wealthier, they used gold. The Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah. By the way, here you also see that it was shpudin, straight.
Let me ask you,
Stop.
how do you know? What do you mean that the halachs has to be straight? Maybe it's halachs has to be shaved. So how do you know?
A kana is straight. A kana is straight.
Kana is straight.
Every kana, I mean, most cases, a kana is straight.
Could be blown by the wind.
If it's blown by the wind, then a kana.
Yeah, but how do you know when the word halachs means straight?
Diagonal. Usually, achs means diagonal. That's the translation. Diagonal like this.
It can go sheaf also.
Yasher ba'alachsen. That's what Rabbi Avram ben Rambam says, no?
Rabbi Avram says that from Rashi, I don't see that you can't prove. That he means that straight. Rashi's trying to explain you. Rashi's trying to explain you that don't say
Halachs doesn't mean straight.
Alachsen. And what does Rashi say, alachsen? Also diagonal. Also diagonal.
Alachsen means from here to here. But if it's an order straight or an order around, lav dafka.
I think alachsen is usually meant as a straight diagonal.
The opposite of nosen, you say.
Shachem oilim ba'alachsen.
The opposite of nosen saying he saw the menorah. What do you say?
The opposite says that the tzitz in the menorah are in Rome. The Shimon said he saw the menorah in Rome. He was just saying that the 6 branches were facing. The 6 numbers were facing the middle. He doesn't get involved in other things.
It was around or not.
No, that's.
means Rabbi, that means the Rebbe.
If Chaim Kanievsky says Kfarei Iru, he probably means the Rebbe. Yeah. That's my assumption, but I don't know for sure.
At the same time, it's all b'tzad.
Chaim Kanievsky also says clearly that they're making a mistake.
Who else spoke about it so public? Only the Rebbe probably.
Chaim Kanievsky wrote about it. The Rebbe spoke about it. Rav Kapach writes about it a few places. That it's a big mistake to do it any other way. And Shapsi Frankel,
but the menorah of Simchas by Shaiva was
outside.
It's outside.
I don't know.
Shlomo Melech made 10 menorahs, no?
13.
Shlomo Melech made 10 menorahs. Shlomo made 10 menorahs in the first Beis HaMikdash. So could be, it says in Malachim and Divrei Hayam, could be, maybe Titus got one of those. The question is, if it was Shlomo's menorah, the dragon, you have a problem. No, on the menorah there wasn't a dragon. You'll just say when they engraved it, they added a dragon. The menorah didn't have a dragon on the. If it was Shlomo Melech, of course it didn't have a dragon. But they would say they added a dragon. But the issue then is you have to say that Shlomo built the menorah different than Moshe. Rashi says in Truma that Shlomo's menorah was exactly like Moshe, and the Medrash also says it was exactly like Moshe. But there is a theory like that. There's a theory that it was Shlomo's, and that's why it wasn't that shape.
There's a Gemara that one of they sent one Jew that wasn't so there's to bring a menorah Caliph from the West.
He went inside.
He went inside. He bought the menorah.
Yeah, he was inside.
And he didn't want to go
He went in
back.
the country and he bought the menorah.
He didn't want to go back.
And he gave it to them, and then he said, "No, this is the."
Yosef Meshissa. That's
But then obviously they bought
Yosef
the
Meshissa.
menorah from the Beis Hamikdash.
Yeah.
So he was taken.
That's the Greeks. That's the Beis Rishon, I think.
So they bought the menorah from the Beis
no, or-
Hamikdash. That was the menorah from the Beis Hamikdash by the Goyim.
That wasn't Titus.
Yeah.
This was the second. This was Tisha's.
Yosef Meshissa.
Yeah. So he went stay in Kachikucha because he was a
Darf guckt dann. I have to look.
in the Paroiches. He came out blood.
That's Titus, yeah.
It was Titus.
But Yosef Meshissa bought the menorah from the Beis Hamikdash. He didn't bring any random menorah because the chutzpah was that whatever the Aver was that he went into the Heichel.
Says he went into the Heichel Yosef Meshissa. I don't remember.
That was his Aver.
Zar lo
He didn't
yikra.
want to go back.
From Kachikodesh.
And it also says in Avos the Rebbe Nosson that the Rome has the menorah, and it says in Sifri Zuta.
That's what I was asking just before. So he didn't see
But
it.
we don't. The Shimon saw, but we don't know that was the Arch of Titus menorah. Doesn't say what it. Shimon says he saw the menorah, not he saw the arch.
Oh, I thought he saw the arch.
But I was.
Also, the Shimon lived much long after the arch.
Because he was
He lived the next century, so certainly he got access to the menorah, according to this medrash.
Could be Titus.
Again, there's a medrash the menorah stayed in Eretz Yisrael. It's not so clear what happened to the menorah. There's machlokes.
Was halt man hand, wie de menorah?
I know what you know.
No, if you go on Matter, you should say everything was Moshe Rabbeinu was making.
That, yeah.
It was goyness.
That's it.
Everything.
Yeah, but there's also a Gemara that the Chashmonaim had to bring spits. If the menorah of Shlomo was still in the second Beis Hamikdash, why didn't they just use one of the menorahs of Shlomo? So you have to say that the Chashmonaim didn't have access to a golden
It was
menorah.
Tama.
Huh?
Or they were Matama.
Ich frage han, wenn, was die kann.
So
Du
they
eine,
won
was
them.
zerandern, was die kann.
No, but then the Gemara says when they got Hashiru, they made silver. And then years later, when they got wealthier, they finally got gold. L'chayda, once they were Matahir, after the Tefillah, you bring a Shlomo's menorah. So l'chayda, you have to say that the Yavanim or somebody stole Shlomo's menorahs. They were gone, or maybe by then Chadnatz already. So then Titus didn't have them.
I think he wanted to use reverse psychology, Titus. Because Titus didn't want to show the real menorah. Because in case they ever want to build the Beis Hamikdash again, they should build it wrong.
Aha. The Cher?
He didn't want it because
Interesting.
they advised, let them think, because I'm getting rid of everything. I'm melting everything.
Wow, so Titus wants when we rebuild it, it should be wrong.
Exactly.
So he says that's the kanoos of the Rebbe. Don't make this mistake.
So how do you
Okay.
know the cups was like this? You say
The Rambam, I don't know.
Not why the pictures?
This is Guf Savyad.
Yeah, I believe you. Aber for was is hat es direkt gemacht, the cups should be like this. For why?
Because it's Balachsen.
Well, this has Balachsen.
Ja, ja.
For was? Ich kann es machen verkehrt auch.
What do you mean?
Ich kann es machen da über die Cups. Ist es nicht Balachsen?
Rasch hat mich gemacht an Zier.
No, the Gviyim are upside down.
Deze vraag ik, was ik weer, ben ik daar eens immer verkehrt? Is es nicht Balachsen?
No, the Gviyim, the stick is Balachsen.
Yeah,
It's a separate part of the shear. Separate part of the shear.
You tell a cup, Kim does.
When you drink it, it's upside down. The question is, why didn't the Rambam make the cups like when you put on a table?
Yeah.
That was the question.
This is the
So
question.
if Kapach says that the Rambam was not Medayik, but it doesn't make sense because the Rambam does it in every single picture that we have. He's Medayik in this.
So there's no
22 times he makes them.
There's no tzita for
The Rashi doesn't.
right?
Rashi doesn't.
Rashi never made a P. There's no.
We don't have no. Only from the Rambam. Ich weiß nicht. Ich weiß nicht.
I saw in Israel a alte chemisch. Aber gesehen am Menorah.
We should be zeicher to see the Menorah. Take it from me out.
Thank you, thank you. And I'm already 40, it's still in bed and
What do you say? Oh, the front.
Rush. Very detailed.
Of Herzog.
Suggest that whether they fell off the goof and it was Miksha Achazog.
That's a good question.
As was.
If it was Miksha, either it could have been broken.
It's a fun piece of gold.
Gold is soft. Maybe it was broken.
gold
I don't
can be
know.
broken. The same way it can be broken to the shape.
It's a babatische Terrace, ist gesagt.
Also der Rebbe gesagt. The Rebbe said over the answer.
Rashi zoekt in
Mendel,
Balasko.
bei Verbringen, der Rebbe said over the answer. He said, it's a balabatish answer.
Wie von Rav?
Kannst du sagen, Bechlal, den ganzen Bechlal ist ja Menorah. Aber,
No, Rav Herzog hat gewollt sagen, von was
was soll man halb? Ob sie nicht der Idee ist, Bechlal nicht der.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.